Fine. Next 3 days. Okay. So we are not telling that, okay, we'll be able to, what is the word, convey all the aspects. But what are the important aspects a medical researcher should know? So we'll be able to cover it, and we'll be able to, we'll try to sensitize you. And one request to all the delegates, all respected delegates. So make it as a more interactive. So any query at any point of time, if you want, you can interrupt at that point of time itself, or later on, we will have a discussion on it. Don't keep the doubt with you. So there is a saying, no, because if you want to speak something, and if you're just keeping silent, means that means you're lying it. That's what people used to say, right? So Peterson told that, because if you want to speak it up, so you have to speak it up. If you are not speaking up, if you want to speak, then that means you are lying it. So I request all the to stop it when, as and when you want to get clarified the doubts, or if you want at the end also, yes, very well, we can do it. So request is that make it very interactive. Fine. So now we are going to talk on the statistics. As we know, when you are talking about the statistics, being a biologist, being a clinician, or the people with the biological background, so they will be like this. Fine. So why you'll be like this? When you are talking about the biostatistics or statistics, you'll be thinking many things. That means I am going to come with a lot of formulas, mathematics. I'll be coming with a lot of formulas. I'll be presenting with a lot of formulas like this, a lot of complex formulas like this, a lot of notations, Greek, Latin notations. Fine. So by keeping in mind these type of things, you'll be so scared. But as far as our next 3 days is concerned, we will not be talking, we will not be telling any formulas, complicated formulas. We will not be using a lot of statistical jargons. So we will make it very simple. Okay. So by using a common man's language. So in that way, we will make biostatistics in a biostatistics will made in an easy format. So that is our aim. So don't worry, we are not going to use any formula, nothing. But at the same time, we will throw the concepts which are very essential for a medical researcher is concerned. Fine. So as we know, it's a post-lunch session. We have a risk. There is a risk. So no other no go. You have to take the risk. What is that risk? This is the risk. Fine. But there is no other go. Okay. The show must go on. People used to say that the show must go on. So kindly excuse with me. Okay. This time, very important and very toxic time. It's a very malignant time, you would say. But at the same time, I request everyone to be alert. That is what, if you're just making more interactive, so you'll not be sleepy. Fine. Now coming to the subject. So these are very, all these things, whatever I projected here, it is very much known to you all. You are a clinician, you are a surgeon. Just think about a surgeon. Okay. Lakshmi madam is a surgeon. Okay. Just think about a surgeon without this instrument. What a surgeon can do without forceps, without scissors, without surgical blade, without surgical knife, what they can do it. Because why? These are the tools or instruments for performing the surgery. If these tools are not there, they cannot perform their duty. They cannot perform the surgery. The same way, as far as the research is concerned, so biostatistics is a tool. It is a tool for what? It is a tool for conducting medical research. Whatever the way you are using this, what is it called, a knife or surgical blade or forceps, whatever it may be, the same way you want a tool to conduct your research. If we don't have the tool, you cannot perform the surgery. Statistics is a tool. It's an instrument which is used for conducting the medical research. Therefore, we used to say, as the knife or blade or scissors is to surgery, fine, so is the biostatistics medical. This is very much required. Why? Because the entire research methodology based on the statistical methods and principles. The current research methodology largely depends upon the statistical methods, statistical principles. So you should have a basic idea. You should have a basic understanding on different statistical methods and principles. to do the justice with the research, to do a valid, reliable, scientifically valid and scientifically reliable research. Therefore, it is a tool. It is very, very essential for conducting a research. So as we know, we are dealing with the biostatistics. Biostatistics deals with a biological data. So what it deals, statistics will, what statistics deals with, okay, statistics is used to generate or collect the data. How we can generate the data? How we generate the data or how we can collect the data? Statistics will help us to organize the data and classify the data. Fine. Statistics will help us to present the data and tabulate the data. Statistics will help us to analyze the data and generate the information from the data. Statistics will allow us to, or statistics will help us to interpret the data or to conclude the results. Therefore, in that sense, it's a tool, it's an instrument which is used for medical research. These are the different steps we are using in medical research. So we want a tool for all these things. That tool is nothing but the biostatistics. Now, as you know, we are just doing a research. You are doing a research. Research is a journey. Journey from starting to end, from the development to making the report. So it is a journey. Now you have to think, being a researcher, you have to think whether you are taking this research as a need-based, by compulsion you are doing it. So if I want to do a research because otherwise I won't get a promotion. If I want to do a research, otherwise I will not be able to complete my MD or DM or MCH degree. Fine. So if you are doing a research by compulsion, or if you are doing a research for a need, certain need, then definitely so you will not be able to enjoy the research. So what you have to do? So you have to convert this as a passion. You should be very passionate towards research. Whatever research you are doing it, whether it is a basic level research, laboratory-based research, whether you are doing it community-based research, whether you are doing a clinical research, whatever may be the research, you first of all you passion towards the research. You should be passionate towards research. If you are passionate towards research, then only you will be able to enjoy the each and every steps in the research. Therefore, my request to all the lot of PGs, I have seen a lot of some students here. So whether, even though if it is a need based, even though if it is a compulsion based, make it as a passion. Try to convert it as a passion. Otherwise, you cannot enjoy the steps that you have to do, you are doing in conducting your research. So always try to be passionate towards research. If you are very passionate towards research, you will be able to do the justice with each and every steps which are very essential in research. And each and every steps in research. You have to be very, 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 very careful in research. Being a clinician, I am talking to the clinician, whether you are a physician or you may be a surgeon. Let us suppose a patient has come to you. What you will be asking the patient? First, you will ask their name. What is your name? It is nothing for, it is just for record purpose or just an identifier. Nothing more than that in research. The name of the individual has no role. The name of the individual has no what is for research. It is just an identifier. Then after that, what you will ask? You will ask, what is your age? What do you want to know? Being a clinician, you want to know what is their age. Because age is a clinically important parameter for deciding your treatment or management. So you want to know the age. That is what you are converting. You are making a question and asking a question to the patient. What is your age? Next one, you are asking, have you fever? You want to know whether the patient is febrile or febrile. So you want to know whether the patient is having a fever or not. You are converting it as a question and asking whether you have fever or not. You will be asking the question, if fever is there, how long? How long you have the fever? So you may be asking whether you have the arthritis, arthralgia, or myalgia, whatever it may be, joint pain. You will be asking the patients because you want to know whether the patient is having arthritis or arthralgia or myalgia. For getting that information, for getting that, what is called information, you are asking a question in terms of a question. Similarly, if arthralgia or arthritis or myalgia is there, yes, how long? Then you have whether the pain is there or not. If pain is there, so how much pain is there? So you will be asking a lot of questions to the patients, right? So are you diabetic? Are you hypertensive? So these are the questions from a surgeon to diagnose the disease. Fine. So if you are asking the question, what the respondents will give, the respondents will be the patients. Repeat your questions. If you are not asking the question, you will not get the reply. Fine. So whatever the question you are asking, you will get the reply. Sometimes you will not get the reply from the patients, but you are asking the question. But at the same time, if you are not asking the question, the patient has no chance to say the answer for the particular domain is concerned. Therefore, you are asking the question, the respondent is giving the answer to it. And that is what you are doing in your daily clinical practice. The same thing in research, but I am going to give the questions as one name, and I am going to give some name for the reply given the patients by using another name. So that is what very important in research. That is what is called as data and variable. So what is data and what is variable? Whatever the question you are asking, previously I shown you, whatever the question you are asking, this question is based on the variable. So age is a variable. So you want a response to that age. That is why you are converting this a question, and these questions will be asked to the respondents. Respondents will reply to it. Therefore, all these are variables. For getting the reply from the respondents, you are converting this a question. Therefore, it is a variable. Therefore, what is variable? Variable is nothing but it is the most, the very important definition, or most commonly used the definition of variable in research. Variable is nothing but any characteristics or attribute. It can be any characteristics or attribute of your interest under study. It's a characteristic. Age is a characteristic. Gender is a characteristic. Fever status is a characteristic. There, what is called a inflammatory marker is a characteristic. So what are the characteristics and attribute of your interest under study? With the two conditions, this is very important. All characteristics and attributes cannot be called as a variable, but at the same time, characteristics or attribute, variable is a characteristics and attribute with those conditions. What are those conditions? First condition is that we should be able to assess it, or we should be able to measure it. Assessment in terms of qualitative in nature. The qualitative aspects, qualitative characteristics, we cannot measure it, therefore you will be assess it. Quantitative characteristics, we can measure it. Therefore, any characteristics or attribute that can be assessed or measured. This is the first condition. Second condition is that it is varies either from time to time. It should vary from time to time, or it should vary from individual to individual, or it should vary from place to place. If these two conditions are satisfied, then those characteristics and attributes are called variable in research. So this is the important definition. So very important aspect as far as the research is concerned. So that is what I told. All characteristics and attributes cannot be called as a variable. If these characteristics and attributes possess these two conditions, then those type of characteristics and attributes called as variable. This is the most robust definition of variable in research. These variables: age, for gender, smoking status, BMI category, status, clinical outcome. This is one set of variables. See, another one is education status, clinical stages of patients, severity of pain, income status. Another set of variables. Age, your income, SBP, BMI, hemoglobin, HbA1c, interleukin parameters, inflammatory markers, immunological markers, biochemical markers. See, all these things are another set of variables. Why these are variables? Because all these characteristics and attributes possess those two conditions. That is, either we can assess it or we can measure it, and it is either varies from either to time, or from place to place. Therefore, or otherwise, since all these characteristics and attributes possess those two conditions, so these are called variables. Fine. So why I put in different boxes, I will tell you why. There is some purpose why I put in different boxes. See, what are the different types of variables in research? So there are a number of variables, but mostly variables can be broadly classified into three in the initial stage: independent variable, variable, and confounding variable. These are the three types of variables we will be dealing with in research. A lot of other variables are there, but we are not going to the details of those things because it's an advanced one. So independent variable, dependent variable, or dependent variables, other name we used to set the outcome variable, and third one is a confounding. Independent variables. The total dependent variables are outcome variables. What is our interest? So if we want to know what is our see, Vishnu Bhatt sir is there, and sir has done a lot of what's got a number of trials, number of clinical trials on effect of hypothermia among the patients with birth asphyxia. See, so what is the effect of hypothermia? What is the effect of hypothermia? How we are assessing it? Fine, that's an outcome. What is an outcome of interest? That is your dependent variable. That means dependent variable means it's a variable, outcome variable, or in other way, it is a variables which is influenced by independent variables. Fine. So it is influenced by many other variables. For the outcome of a patient, outcome of the treatment. Outcome of the treatment is influenced by many factors, many variables. Age of the patient, gender of the patient, what's called the clinical severity, disease severity of the patient, or the treatment of the treatment received by patients. Fine. So finally, outcome, whether patient is survived or not. Because this survived or not, it's my outcome variable. This outcome variable is influenced by many variables. That variable is called as an independent variable. What is an independent variable? Independent variable is variable which can influence on the outcome variable. What are the variables which can influence on the outcome variable? That is called as an independent variable. Which variable is influenced by independent variable? That is called as a dependent variable. Just think about all the outcome variables. Whatever the patient, you will be what is the outcome? The patient is cured or not? Patient is survived or not? Patient is responded or not? Patient is relapsed or not? See, all these things are outcome variable, outcome of interest, and many factors are influenced on this outcome. Those factors, those variables are called independent variable. Therefore, the variable which can influence what's called or which can influence on the outcome, that is called as an independent variable. The variable which is influenced by the independent variable, that is called as a dependent variable. So in research, outcome variables are called dependent variable. So these are the two types of major what is called types of. So use class outcome variable, that is called the dependent. What are the variables that can influence on this outcome variable? You classify it as a dependent variable. And another very important variable is called as a confounding variable. So before that outcome variable, before going to the confounding outcome variable, so sometimes you have the variable and second outcome. So you have primary outcome. The primary outcomes, as a statistics, biostatistics methodology is concerned, primary outcome is aligned directly with the primary aim. So what are the variables in your primary objective? So what is the secondary outcome? So what are the variables aligned with your secondary objective? So this is how you are classifying it. So what are the variables required? What are the variables aligned with your primary objective? That is called as a primary outcome. What are the variables which is aligned with your secondary outcome? Yes, secondary objective, that is called as a secondary outcome. You can classify what are the primary outcomes, what are your secondary outcomes. Why? Because why you are classifying it mostly. So our research methodology or the sample size is estimated primarily based on the primary outcomes. So you have very lot of outcome variables, better to classify as a primary outcome and secondary outcome. So why? Because it is easy for designing your study. The sample size is based on your primary outcomes. Now another very important aspect is a confounding variable. What is confounding variable? Fine. Typically has an effect on your independent variable. That means the variable which can influence on, that is called as an independent variable. The variable which is influenced by the independent variable, that is called as a dependent variable or outcome variable. So it is obviously independent variable typically has an effect on your dependent variable. Fine. Let us suppose this is my research question. Lack of exercise leads to weight gain. This is my research question. Lack of exercise leads to weight gain. What is my independent variable here? My independent variable is lack of exercise. What is my outcome variable or dependent variable? Weight gain. Fine. So in this example, just think about lack of exercise and weight gain. there are some variables, some other variables that has also an effect on your dependent variable and also independent variable. Fine. So for example, see this physical exercise and weight gain. Okay, just think about the professional. This is an independent variable. This is a dependent variable. Take another variable, for example, professional status, age, gender, etc. This will have an effect on the weight gain, outcome variable, and this will have an influence on the independent variable as well. So the professional status, age, gender, these variables will have an effect on what? Weight gain. Weight gain is a dependent variable. And at the same time, this variable will have an influence on the independent variable as well. Therefore, this is called as a confounding variable. This is confounded with the outcome. It is not only the physical exercise. Okay, the weight gain and the physical exercise, it is influenced by other factors as well. That's the physical professional status, age, and gender. Fine. Therefore, this will have effect of both on independent and outcome variable. Therefore, variable. Then it in a relationship between length of gestation and birth weight of infants. So, in a relationship between length of gestation and what's called birth weight of infants. What is my independent variable here? My independent variable is duration or length of gestation. What is my outcome of variable? Outcome variable or dependent variables? Birth weight of the infants. So maybe another factor, maternal weight gain, is one of the factors that might influence on both these two. Therefore, so maternal weight gain depends upon the duration of the what's called length of the gestation. That will impact on the what's called the birth weight of the infants as well. Therefore, these type of variables are called confounding variables. Therefore, first of all, you have to identify what is your independent variable, what is your dependent variable, and what is your confounding variable. So, confounding variable, there are two types of. One is called established confounders. Second one is the potential confounders. So, potential confounders, it may or may not, but established confounder means yes, it is already established that yes, it has some effect on both independent and outcome variable. Therefore, if it is established, so you have to say that it's established confounders. So, what are the potential confounders? So, you have to decode it. What are the potential confounders? This is about independent variable, dependent variable, and confounding variable. So, independent variable means the variable which can influence on the outcome. And what is outcome variable or dependent variable? The variable which is influenced by the independent variable. Okay. The confounding variable means so the variable it has an influence on the outcome variable, and at the same time it has an influence on the independent variable as well. Fine. So these are the three types of variables we are dealing with research in dealing in statistics whenever we are using these statistical methods in research. How to accommodate deal with this we'll discuss whenever you are talking about different tests of statistical significance. Now coming to the data. Variables, I told you, it's a characteristics or attribute which can which we should be able to assess it or measure it, and it varies from time to time or individual to individual or person to person. So what are the questions you are asking to the patient? That is the variable. And what are the response given by the patient? That is called as a data. Then what is the definition of data in research and research methodology? The data is nothing but the value assigned to the variable. This is the most robust definition of data in research. The value assigned to the variable. So we have the variable and we are asking the question, we are getting the response from the patient. That response is nothing but the data. So age equal to 35. We are assigning this 35 equal to 35 to age. Therefore, age equal to 35. Therefore, 35 is the data and age is the variable. In that sense, data is nothing but the value assigned to the variable. And if I'm refining this definition, it can be more robustly, we can define it as it is any observed or estimated values of the variable. What are the observed values of the variable? What are the estimated values of the variable? All variables cannot be what is called observed. For example, you are saying the BMI. BMI cannot be what is called observed or measured directly. It's an outcome of what? Height and weight. So we are deriving it from the height and weight. Therefore, it's an estimated value. Similarly, EGFR. It is from the creatine, right? You are using the formula to calculate the EGFR from the creatine value. Therefore, EGFR cannot be directly, it's not directly measured, it is an estimated. It's an estimated GFR. Therefore, it's an estimated value like BMI, EGFR, like that. Okay. Therefore, it's an observed value or estimated value of the variable. Or simply we can say that it is an assigned to the variable. The value may be either observed value or it may be an estimated value. And this is called as data. So these are the variables and these are the data. So which one precedes? Variable precedes. That's what I told. If you are not asking the question, patient will not give the reply. If you want to get the reply, you want to ask the question. That means if the question is not there, answer is not there. Similarly, if the variables are not there, data will not be there. Therefore, what are the data required? First, you have to define, so what are the variables? Accordingly, frame the variable. Because data, variable precedes and data succeeds. Fine. So if that variable is not there, data cannot be there. Data cannot be generated. Therefore, first of all, the beginning itself, you should identify what are the variables you should have and what are the data is required. Accordingly, you have to generate the what is called. You have to identify the variables in your research. So always remember, variable is not there, data will not be there. Fine, because value assigned to the variable is called as data. Fine. Now data, you are getting the data, you want to convert the information. That's what you are doing in research. We have the data and you have to convert the information. There is information is lying inside the data. We have to dig it out. How to dig it out? That is what we are using statistical methods. Okay. So we have the data. From data, you have to convert in information. That information will lead to knowledge. So always remember, data and information are not same in research. Data is nothing but the value assigned to the variable. Information is nothing but processed data. Whatever the data, whatever the outcome you are getting from the data, that is called as an information. People used to say that what is data means immediately say that's an information. No, because the outcome you are getting from the data is called as information. Data will lead to information. That information will lead to knowledge. How to convert? It is by using appropriate statistical methods. Fine. Now, so if you are not using the proper statistical methods, what is going to happen? Whatever the information you are getting, generating from the data, so you are using statistical methods. Therefore, you have to use the right statistical methods to convert this data to information. Fine. So the data, there are different observational data. Fine. These are first level of data. So observational data is captured through observation of a behavior or activity. Just observation. We can say that the data generated through observation study. Simply, we can say when you are connecting this with a research design, study designs, so it is already been covered, observational designs and experimental design. Okay, the data which we have generated from the observational study, that is called as an observational data. So experimental data, next one is experimental data. It is through the experimental designs. We can say that the data generated through experimental research or experimental design, then it is called an experimental data. Another one is the simulated data. This we are not using extensively in our specialty medical research. Okay, it is generated through the computer simulation, simulated data. Okay, so we are by imitating, it is generated by imitating the operation of a real world process or system. It is a computer generated, not using extensively. But there are some instances where the pharmacogenomics is concerned or genomic studies concerned. Yes, we are using some simulated data. Another one is derived or compiled data. What is a compiled data? Compiled data is nothing but the secondary data we are getting from some resources. Okay. What is the derived data? Derived data means, as I told you, it is derived by using mathematical formulas like BMI, like EGFR, because these are the derived data. We are deriving from the mathematical operations, mathematical functions. Okay. So these are the four types of data we are just doing. It's either observation data, it is through observation study, experimental data, it is generated through experimental designs, simulated data, it is a computer generated data, and the last one is either derived data. That means we are using some mathematical principles, mathematical formula or mathematical logic to derive this what is called data, and the last one is the secondary data. Now, what are the different types of variables and different types of data? Now, you know what is variable, what is data. Now, what are the different types of variables and data? Variables can be broadly classified into two, as qualitative and quantitative. The two broad categories, as you know it. Now, again, further we are categorizing it. Qualitative data, again, it can be classified into as open base and attribute type. These are two types of qualitative data. So, what is open base? It's a pure qualitative. Because if you're just using a pure qualitative design, that means you're asking the patient, narrate. You're asking the patient, you just explain your problem. It's a pure qualitative in nature. So they will narrate their stories, either in terms of words, or in terms of sentences, or in terms of paragraphs. That means it's a textual format. That's a pure qualitative research. That's the open type qualitative data. Open type qualitative is involved in a pure qualitative research. The second one is an attribute. We call it as a semi-qualitative or semi-quantitative, whatever it may be. This attribute, so coming to the quantitative, there are two types of quantitative data. It's a discrete data or continuous data. Discrete data means whole in number, 0, 1, 2, 3, etc. Continuous means it can be a fractional part as well. Because number of children, 0, 1, 2, 3. It cannot be 1.5. So number of relapses. It can be no relapse, 1 relapse, 2, 3, like it cannot be anything in between 0 and 1 because it's a whole in number, counting data. So the continuous data, hemoglobin, it can be 8.5. It can assume any value within the given range, either it's an integer or it may be a fraction. So that is called as a continuous data. Fine. So these are the four types of data. As I told you, attribute type qualitative data. Again, there are two types. This is called a semi-quantitative. One is called nominal data. Second one is called as ordinal data. So these are the four types of data we are regularly dealing in medical research. Right? So open type qualitative data is also there, but that is involved only in a pure qualitative research because the data will be text format, textual format of narrations. Right? So, but when you are dealing with the quantitative research, so you will be dealing with nominal data, ordinal data, qualitative, and discrete data and continuous data. Fine. So this nominal data is also called as data, and discrete and is called as quantitative data. Fine. So that is what it's categorical. Nominal and ordinal, it's an attribute type. So other name of attribute is called as categorical data. So it's a categorical data, nominal and ordinal. Second one is a quantitative, interval and ratio. So in the beginning itself, you should have a good idea what type of variable you are going to deal, because entire research methodology depends on what type of data you are having. You have the ordinal data or nominal data, or you have the quantitative data, because research methodology varies. Whatever the methodology you are using for quantitative data is different from ordinal data, which is different from what is called nominal data. Therefore, beginning itself, what type of variable and what type of variable you are going to have in your research. So you should have proper idea, correct idea, then only you can just design your study properly. Now, what is a nominal data? Nominal data, first level, nominal data, it is the data differentiated only by name, not it is just differentiated, just categorizing and giving names. That's all, nothing more than that. It is not based on any measurement. Okay, for example, gender. It's a male and female. We categorize the gender and given some names. It is not by using any measurements. Response status, no response, partial response, complete response. Clinical outcomes, dead or alive. Blood type, A, B, and O. That means we are categorizing it and giving some names. That is what is called as nominal data. It is the differentiated only by name, not by any measurements. That is what is called as nominal variable. Fine. So the nominal variables of two types, maybe dichotomous or maybe non-dichotomous. What about dichotomous or binary or binomial? If this is having only two categories, then it's a dichotomous. If we have more than two, then it's a non-dichotomous. Because whatever the, as I told you, between the variable type or data type, methodology will vary. Similarly, if we got the nominal data, again, whether it's a dichotomous or non-dichotomous, research methodology will change. Statistical methods will change. We have one method for dichotomous and we have another method for non-dichotomous. So even though it is nominal data, you should identify whether it is nominal data, or whether it is autonomous data or non-autonomous data, according to the methodology varies. So for example, you see data male and female, smoking status, smokers and non-smokers, died out, survived, benign or malignant. So everyone is two categories. You are dealing with this type of things. But at the same time, see the non-dichotomous response status, you have seen the no response, partial response, complete response. You want to identify it, you have to make it a separate category. Fine. Similarly, histology, benign, malignant or intermediate. Similar blood group A, B, AB and O. So domicile, urban, semi-urban, rural. More than two categories. Because more than two categories methodology. So at the beginning itself, you should decide whether you are going to have the nominal data, if it is nominal data, whether it is dichotomous data or non-dichotomous data. Because methodology varies, statistical methods varies, sample size estimation varies. Fine. In this one, so these are the categorical data. That's what I told you because I am categorizing different. And second one is called ordinal data. It is nothing but ordered categories. Again, it is a categorical data. It is an ordered category, or in other way, it is a categories with ranking. Okay, so it's a category with ranking. Ranking involved in the categories. That is what is called ordinal data. Like see, you are using the questionnaire. Lot of Likert scales are there. Likert scale response options. Those things are called ordinal scale data. Ordered categories with ranking. For example, you see the BMI category. Say clinical and pathological stages of the status. Agreement level. Similar EGF category, G1, G2, G2A, so G3A, G3, G4, G5, based on the EGFR value. Similar satisfaction, very dissatisfied, dissatisfied, satisfied. Like that, you are making a category, but there is a rank. There is an order. Right? Even it's a category with ranking, therefore it is called as an ordinal scale data. Fine? What about the second stage? See, in all the things you see, it's a category with ranking. Therefore, it is called as an ordinal scale data. And last one, it's a quantitative data. Okay, so it's a quantitative which is expressed numerically. Fine. So we are expressing, we are measuring it. We are measuring it. What is the magnitude of it? For example, age, BMI, lipid profile. We are saying that similarly HB, hemoglobin, serum, all these variables are we are just measuring. Therefore, this is called as a quantitative data. So we have different methods, different sample size, different analysis pattern for a quantitative data when compared to the nominal data or ordinal data. Fine. So these are the different types of data. Okay. So mostly you will be dealing with all this data in our daily research or daily practice. In your daily practice, being a clinician, in your daily practice, you will be dealing with all these type of variables. But this is very important in research for deciding your research methodology. Fine. So in this one, so this is the last one. So the last one is a quantitative data. The nominal data, categorical data, then quantitative data. This one, the highest level of among this, the highest level of data is called as a quantitative. Okay, so the highest level is quantitative. Why? Because anytime this quantitative data you can categorize it. So you can categorize because you see that you have the BMI values. Anytime you can categorize it as underweight, normal, overweight, obese, and morbidly obese. You can classify it. So if you want to convert this one again into what is called categorical data, nominal data, you can do it. But the reverse is not possible. If you are collecting the data as categorical and later on you cannot decode it as a what is called quantitative data. But if you are collecting it as a quantitative data, anytime you can categorize it in terms of ordinal data or in terms of nominal data. Therefore, among this, the highest level of what is called data is called as quantitative data. For example, you say BMI, you are collecting a BMI. Anytime you can just categorize it as obese or overweight or normal or underweight. Or if you are interested only the overweight and normal, that can be done because you have the values. But if you are just collecting it as an overweight and normal, later on you cannot find out what is the average BMI. And categorize it during analysis. But reverse, it is not possible. Therefore, better if the highest level of, since the quantitative data is the highest level of data, okay, if there is scope, collect it as a quantitative and categorize it. This is very, very important as far as the research is concerned. See, now I have the P. That is my variable is P. Okay. One researcher is doing, collecting it as a pain is there or not. I am interested to know whether pain is there or not. Whatever variable it is, now I am treating this variable as a category. Okay. Another researcher, okay, he is interested to know what is the categories of pain. First of all, pain is there or not. If pain is there, I am not interested in what magnitude of the pain, intensity of the pain, I am not interested in the previous example. Pain is there or not. But here I am just seeing that I want to know what is the level of pain. Mild pain, moderate pain, severe pain, extreme severe pain. Again, the variable is same. My approach is different. I am treating as an ordinal. Another person, they will be using the VAS scale and they want to measure. They want to assess the intensity of the pain. So here he is quantitative. That means variable is same. Okay. So in the same research, you are doing a research and you have the variable pain. And first of all, the thing is that whether you are considering it as nominal variable, you have one methodology. Treating it as an ordinal data, you have another methodology. You are treating it as a quantitative, your methodology is different. Everything may be same, but how you are treating is a variable. It is also very, very important as far as the research is concerned. We have one methodology for nominal, we have another methodology for ordinal, we have another methodology for quantitative. Therefore, the beginning itself, you should have good clarity on how you are dealing with this variable and how you are treating this variable is very, very important. Okay, say these are the variables. Say, for example, these are the variables. What is the hemoglobin? We have the hemoglobin. What type of variable it is? It's a quantitative. Smoking status, it's a nominal data. HbA, I'm considering it as a nominal, whether it's a benign or malignant. Clinical severity, ordinal. Creatinine, it's a quantitative. EGFR, it's a quantitative. I'm just seeing the EGFR. But later on, I'm just seeing that EGFR categorizing it. For example, 90, like that, we are just categorizing it 90, then 60 to 89, then 44 to 60, then 29 to 30 to 44, then what's called 15 to 29 or less than 15, and categorizing it, then it is a what's called ordinal data. Then I'm saying that albuminuria, whether it's a normal or microalbuminuria or macroalbuminuria, then it's an ordinal. If there is the level of albumin, then it is a quantitative. So categorizing it based on the level, the normal, microalbuminuria, and macroalbuminuria, then it's an ordinal. So how you are treating is very, very important. Now see, what is the level of hemoglobin among the patients with tuberculosis? This is one. The same research, another person is formulated a question is that what is the prevalence of anemia among the patients with the tuberculosis? So first one, what is the level of hemoglobin? I'm interested, what is the level of hemoglobin? But even slightly changing it, what is the prevalence of anemia among the patients with tuberculosis? Anemia will be assessed by using hemoglobin. But I am not interested what is the level of anemia or what is the level of hemoglobin. I have to know whether the patient is having anemia or not, whether it is less than 8 or more than 8 or not. Right? So everything is same. You are using including the patients and you are collecting the hemoglobin. And the first question I am presenting, this is the average level of hemoglobin. But in the second example, I am not saying that what is the average level of hemoglobin. I am going to say that what proportion is having anemia, what proportion is not having anemia. Fine. So do you think that because these both questions are same? The both questions are not same as far as the methodological is concerned. There is a big difference. What is the difference? Because your treatment of the variable. In the first question, your primary outcome variable, you are treating it as a quantitative, you have one methodology. But at the same time, you're slightly changing the questions. What is the prevalence of anemia? Even though the prevalence will be assessed by use, but at the same time, you are not interested to find out what is the level of what is it called, the hemoglobin. You are interested what proportion is having less than 8 and what proportion is having more than 8. Then it is considered anemia status categorical. We have another methodology. That way, it is having a lot of difference in terms of data types, method of analysis, in terms of interpretations. Okay, different in these two. Fine. Always remember, data is the evidence. Okay, so research generates a large amount of data. Okay, it is an evidence research. Evidence for what? Evidence to take a decision whether to accept or reject the hypothesis. So it's an evidence to take a decision whether you have to accept or reject the null hypothesis. Fine. Therefore, it is very important. That is the evidence of research. Fine. So good data is a good evidence. Okay. Always ensure good data. Okay. So if the data is wrong, so your decision may be wrong. Fine. So this is very, very important as far as the data and variable is concerned. Fine. Now you are doing a research. You have done a research. You generate the data. Fine. See this slides. So this is the data, right? Finally, you'll be putting in a whatever the format you want to put it. What is this? This is called as raw data, right? See this raw data, you will not be able to make it out anything. Okay, so you will not be able to make it out anything by seeing this raw data. It's a very raw in nature. So what do you have to do? As a first step, you have to classify the data. That is classification of data. This is very, very important as far as the research is concerned. Because these are very raw in nature, we cannot, because a lot of numbers are there. By seeing this one, you will not be able to make it out anything. As a first step, first you classify the data. See, this is my data because it is having a lot of things. What is the classification? Classification is nothing but it is a process of arranging the data according to their common characteristics. For example, the items which are having common characteristics you pull together. For example, I am pulling one subgroup, I am going to make it. Okay, another subgroups I am going to make it with the reds, another subgroups I am going to make with the reds. Now see, after classification, you see that each class, it is called groups. Okay, it's a subgroups. See, within the group, there is a homogeneity. See, within each group, there is a homogeneity. But at the same time, as the group is concerned, there is a heterogeneity, right? So, first step, you classify the data according to the common characteristics. That is what is the classification of data. The first step you are going to do it. Now, how you are going to do it? There are different methods, different types of classification. One is called as a qualitative classification. Second one is called as a chronological classification. Third one is called as a spatial classification. And the last one is called as a quantitative classification. These are different types of classification. Qualitative, chronological, spatial, and quantitative. These are the 4 types of classifications. Qualitative classification. Qualitative classification is a classification based on qualitative characteristics. Based on gender, classifying based on gender, male group, male subgroups and female subgroups, classifying based on the domicile, rural and urban, smoking status, smokers and non-smokers, qualitative characteristics. That is called as a qualitative classification. So we will be doing in our research. This is the qualitative classification. Geographications. It is based on the geographical region. For example, if you are interested to find out what is called the genotype, distribution of different genotypes, distribution of different phenotypes. So what are the genotypes distribution? What are the phenotypes distribution in our locality, in our population? Will it be same as when you are compared to the northeast? It may not be same. Therefore, we want to know either geographical distribution, geographical difference, and regional difference. So you will be classifying according to the geographical classification. Another one is chronological classification. Chronological classification means a classification in terms of time, in terms of days, in terms of weeks, in terms of months, in terms of years, or in terms of decades. Right? So this is called as a chronological classification over a period of time. Classify over a period of time. So this time may be a day, maybe a month, maybe a weeks, maybe a years, maybe a decades, as you wish. This is called as a chronological classification. And the last one, it is a quantitative classifications. It is based on the measurements. For example, we are just classifying based on the BMI because with an underweight, normal, we are just either less than 18.5, 18.5 to 23, or 23 to 25, 25 to 30, 30 to 35, and more than 35 BMI. We are classifying based on the quantitative measurements. Similarly, you see the albuminuria less than 30, you see the normal, 30 to 300 microalbuminuria, more than 300, you see the macroalbuminuria. You are classifying based on the quantity. Similarly, HbA1c, you see the 5.7 less than 0.57 is the normal, 5.7 to 6.7, yes, HbA1c is the pre-diabetic. Yes, more than 6.5, you said they're poor glycemic status, therefore we can say it's a diabetic. Same thing, EGFR status, you see the normal greater than or equal to 90, 60 to 89, 45 to 50, 30 to 44, 50 to 59, and less than 15, that means the renal failure. So you're classifying based on the quantity. This is called a quantitative classification. These are the 4 types of classifications we are doing in research based on the need, right? Either qualitative, quantitative, geographical, or chronological and quantitative. These are the 4 types of classifications we will be doing in research based on the need, right? So what is required? Yes, we will be doing it based on the objective of it. And second one is a method of classification. This is also very important. What are different methods of classification? So methods of classification, for example, you have the data, you're classifying based on gender. Okay, based on what? Based on only one characteristics. So that is what is called as a one-way classification or simple classifications. It is only one character. The classification is based on one characteristic. That is called as a simple classification or one-way classification. Based on gender, we are classifying based on gender. Fine, like this. What you will get? So you have the males how much, females how much. So this is the table you used to get. One-way classification. Okay. Similarly, if you want to know another classification, the patients having what is it called, DM or not DM, patients are hypertension or no hypertension. Okay. So these are called a one-way classification. Now, let us suppose you want to do like this. So first you are classifying male and female. Again, you want to know within the male what is the DM status, and similarly within the females what is the DM status. That means DM status in relation to the gender. So how many characters you have taken? You have taken 2 characteristics, that is gender and DM status. Therefore, this is called as a two-way classification or cross tabulation. This is what is called as two-way classification and cross tabulation. Fine. So we have one. What is first year classification, male and female? Then within the male, what is the diabetes status? Within the females, what is the diabetes status? That is why diabetes in relation to gender. 2 characteristics at a time. Therefore, it is called as a two-way classification or cross tabulation. Fine. So finally, you will get the table like this. Fine. So you get the DM status and you have the gender status. Fine. What about this one? Males with the DM. See the cell frequencies. Males with the DM. Similarly, males with the no DM, females with the DM, and females with the no DM. So this is the entry we used to get it. So cross tabulation. 2 characteristics, therefore it is called a two-way classification or cross tabulation. Sometimes you will be interested to know like this also. Fine. DM in relation to gender, and within this one again hypertension status. That means hypertension in relation to DM and gender. Fine. Therefore, how many characteristics? You are using more than 2 characteristics. Therefore, this is called as a manifold classification. Fine. So that means what are the characteristics? Gender is a characteristics, DM is another characteristics, and hypertension is another characteristics. So it's a more than 2. Therefore, this is called as manifold classification. Fine. More than 2 characteristics at a time. See what will happen here. See this one. This is the table. Right? You will get a table like this. DM, not DM. It's a complex table, complex tabulation. Fine. So this is called as a manifold classification. Fine. Always remember this is a 1 characteristics, 2nd characteristics, 3rd characteristics. Is it? DM is 1 characteristics. Then what's the hypertension is another characteristics, and the 3rd one is what is called the gender is a 3rd characteristics we are dealing with. Okay. So these are the 3 characteristics. Therefore, it's called a manifold classification. So one-way classification, simple classification, 1 characteristics, 2 based on 2 characteristics, so two-way classification, cross tabulation, and 3rd one is the more than 2, that is called as a manifold classification. Fine. See what about this subgroup? This is called a subgroup, right? Now we got different subgroups. It's a males. Fine. What about similarly the second one? What is the second one? Second one is it is a male DM with a no DM. So the same data, one group, we started with one group. How many subgroups we are having? We have 12 subgroups. Okay, we have getting subgroups. That means whenever you have just increase the level of what is called classifications, so you'll have more subgroups. So do you think that is there an issue like this? Is there an issue? Always remember, whenever you are going for classification, this classification has to be decided in the beginning itself. how you are going to classify it. Okay, what are the classes? What are the subgroups you are going to have? This has to be finalized in the beginning itself, not at the during the analysis time. Please don't plan this classification analysis plan. So this subgroups has to be planned in the beginning itself. Why? I will tell you. What is the reason? Otherwise, what is going to happen? I will tell you. Okay, if this classification is not taken into consideration in the beginning itself, during the planning stage itself, so what is going to happen? I will show you in the next example. Let us suppose your objective is assessment of the level of vitamin D among the patients with the tuberculosis. Okay, you want to assess the vitamin D level among the patients with the tuberculosis. Okay, let us suppose you have the 90 patients. Sample size is estimated for this assessing the level of vitamin D. So it is 90. Okay, I assessed it. I got it as vitamin D level is 18.5. Okay, after this, then you have one curiosity to know, compare the level in relation to gender. Okay, this is part of your objective. This is the part of the design. Based on the design, yes, you got the answer. Once you are getting this answer, immediately you have the curiosity, right? What's the curiosity? Is there any difference in the level between the gender? You want to know whether between a male and female. Then you decide to go with a comparing in relation to gender. What will happen? First you will classify it, right? You classified it based on gender. You have 50 males and 40 females. Okay, you assess 19.5 in the male among males and what's got 17.5 in females. Okay, you compared it. Is there an issue in this comparison? There will be an issue. What is that issue? I will tell you. Okay, so after this, you have one curiosity. Again, you have curiosity to know, to compare the vitamin D in relation to gender and DM status. Fine. What you will do? Again, you will classify it. First, you see, you know that males and females. Again, within the males, there are 30 DMs and 20 non DMs. Among the females, 25 DM and 15 non DM. You assessed it. Okay, you got these values, vitamin D. Okay, how many groups you are having? Now you have 4 subgroups. Before it you have 2, now we have 4. Fine. See the number of samples in each subgroups. See the number of samples in each subgroups. So is there an issue in this comparison? There is an issue. What is that issue? I'll tell after the next example. Okay. Again, you are very curious to know. You have to compare in relation to gender, DM, and hypertension status. Okay. What do you do? You will classify. First, you classify based on this. And DM, make a subgroups. How many subgroups you are having? You have 12 subgroups. And you will assess the vitamin D in all these groups. And you will compare it. Fine. Is there an issue? Yes, there is an issue. What is that issue? Sample size may not be sufficient enough for your comparison. Because you are not estimating the samples of minimum sample size required to compare between male and female. Your size is sufficient enough to compare in relation to gender and the DM status. The sample size may not be sufficient enough to compare the vitamin D in relation to the gender, DM, and hypertension status. Because you are not considered this in the beginning itself. That is what we told. Because if you just make a comparison, it will be grossly underpowered. The study will not have sufficient power. Therefore, no scientific value. Okay, it is not reliable. Therefore, that is what we are doing. If you compare, that is to be considered in the beginning itself. That has to be considered while designing your study. That has to be considered while estimating your sample size. That has to be considered what are the statistical methods you are going to propose this analysis. So this is very, very important. What is the solution for it? As what I told you, consider the required subgroups you would like to have for analysis during the design stage itself. Sometimes what will happen? There will be a data-driven subgroups that we will not anticipate it. So we will not anticipate, okay, this factor is present there or not. It's a without anticipation. So there are some that is called a data-driven subgroups. Data is suggesting us to have some groups. Then we can make it. So if you are making it and comparing what you have to do it, see, always remember that if any data-driven subgroup identified which are clinically important for interpretation, always ensure sufficient power for this analysis. You have to ensure whether the sample size is sufficient enough to compare or not. How to do it? By doing the post-power analysis. Okay, so you have to do the any data-driven subgroups you are making and comparing based on that subgroups, the power analysis has to be made and power has to be reported. This is the solutions for a data-driven subgroups. Otherwise, you have to plan the beginning itself. Fine. This is about the second part. And I'll take 5 to 10 minutes for showing you what are the behavior of the data normal distribution. This is the third part of it. It's a small session. Within 5 to 10 minutes, I'll complete it. Third one, behavior of data. I'm calling this a distribution instead of behavior of data. Fine. So you have collected data. You generated the data. Fine. But the person, you know this picture, right? Because it's the Guinness records for the tallest and the shortest. You can expect this type of data. Extreme higher and extreme lower. You can expect it. You cannot say that. So always, otherwise you see, the first picture you see, there is a slight variation, right? There is a variation between the data. So variation is there. And see the second picture, so almost see. Third one you see. Third one and fourth one you see. So almost everyone is same and one is very tall. The same thing happens. One person with extreme short also. So we don't know. After collecting data, you have to assess the behavior of the data. That is called the distribution of data. The statistical treatment is based on the behavior of the data. So the research has to research generate large amount of data. The analysis behavior. We will not say this for the different states which behaves in different ways. First, we will assess how the data behaves. We can use the statistical mechanism to find out how the data behaves. Based on the behavior of the data, so we will decide what statistical treatment is required. The first statistical treatment of the data is based on the distribution. What do you have to do? First, assess the behavior of the distribution of data. So the distribution means, here I am saying that whether the distribution is normal or non-normal. There are plenty of distributions are there in statistics. We are not going to deal all those things. First, assess whether the data follows normal or non-normal. Whether data follows normal distribution or non-normal distribution. For distributions, we are not going to the details of those distributions. First, we have classified as normal or non-normal. If it is normal, we have one set. If it is normal, another set of statistical treatments. Again, within the normal, because A, B, C, D, which one follows, different methods are there. We are not going to deal whether it's a normal or non-normal. Okay, first assess whether it is normal or normal. To do it, simple way, plot the graph. Okay, plot the data and check its shape. Okay, so if the shape is having the belt, approximately bell shapes are normal. Always remember, this is applicable only to the quantitative data. Normal and ordinal data will never follow normal distribution. It is always non-normal. This is applicable only for the quantitative data. Nominal and ordinal data always follows non-normal. It is always considered non-normal. It is applicable only for normal distribution, only for quantitative data. Let us suppose there are 32 students. This is the marks of 32 students. You have conducted examinations for 32 students. First, you have the marks. You plot the graph. First person got 10 marks. You plotted. Second person got 9 marks. You plotted. Okay. Third person got marks 6. Fourth person got marks 30. Okay. You plot this graph. Fine. See, another person got 8. So one more person got 10 marks. So another person got 12 marks. Another person got 5 marks. Another person got 6 marks. There are 2 persons got 6 marks. Like this. See now, 3 persons got 10 marks. 1 person got 11 marks. One more person got 9 marks. Like this, you plot the graph. What will happen? See, I plotted the graph of all the 32 students. See, there are 7 students with the 10 marks. There are 6 students with the 9 marks. There are 5 students with 8 marks. Like this, I got the graph. I plotted the graph based on the marks obtained by the 30 students. So what will happen? Here is the maximum marks. See, there's a tendency to have most of the measurements are clustered in the central part, and very few in the extreme lower values and extreme higher values. There's a pattern, right? So when I just visualizing the graph, the shape of the graph, it is a bell shaped, right? It's a bell shape. Okay. So this got a bell shaped curve or normal curve. This is called as a normal curve. Fine. First you assess whether it's a bell shaped curve or not. Because other statistical methods to check it that we will deal whenever you're talking about that analysis. This is the simplest way of plot the graph and see the shape is bell shaped or not. Of doing it. Objective ways are there. This is the first. Okay, it's a normal curve. Okay, what's a normal curve? Okay, see the central part. This point which balance the curve, right? The point which balance the curve. That is what is called as a mean. Okay, so since it is the central part, it divides that observation into two halves, right? It balances the curve. Okay, it balances the curve. That is called the mean. Therefore, mean divides the observation into halves, right? In normal distribution, mean is the point at which balance the curve, which divides observation into halves. That means 50 like this. See the image of seeing the mirror. Seeing the mirror image, the same thing you can see the normal distribution. You consider this mean as a mirror. The one side is the mirror image of the other side. Fine. Therefore, what will happen? This divides the observation to equal halves. Therefore, 50% of observations will fall with this area, and 50% will fall within this region because it divides, divides, right? First part, both parts are equal. It equally divides the data into two equal halves. Therefore, it's called the mirror image. 50% is the one side and 50% is other side. Fine. Now, what will happen? See this. This graph is going down, right? The graph is moving downwards. Okay. So at one point of time, see, at one point of time, the curve changes its direction. Fine. At one point of the time, the curve changes its direction from concave down to concave up. Like this, you see here on the left side. It is coming down. At one point of time, it started deviating from the downwards direction. Fine. At somewhere this point. Let us suppose this is that point. The point at which the curve changes its direction from concave down to concave up. This is called as a point of inflection. This point is called as a point of inflection in a normal curve. Fine. It is the point at which it changes the concave down to concave up, changes the direction. That is called the point of inflection. And the distance between these 2 points, and the distance between this mean and the point of inflection, this distance is called as a standard deviation in normal distribution. The distance between the mean to the point of inflection, this is called as the standard deviation in normal curve. Fine. If the standard deviation is more, so the width of the normal curve will be more. The standard deviation is small, the width will be less. The width, the standard deviation normal curve is the distance between the mean to the point of inflection, where the point of inflection is nothing but it's the point at which the curve changes its direction from concave down to concave up. That is called as a standard deviation. So this is very, very important as far as the normal distribution is concerned. This is a standard deviation. So I am plotting +1 standard deviation, mean +1 standard deviation will fall here. So mean -1 standard deviation, this will fall this side. Okay, I am adding mean 2 standard deviation, -2 standard deviation, so +2 standard deviation, -2 standard deviation. Fine. So +3 standard deviation and -3 standard deviation. Fine. So this is the area we are getting. Mean ±1 standard deviation, mean ±2 standard deviation, mean ±3 standard deviation. So now, as far as this one is concerned, there is an important property for a normal distribution is concerned. Fine. What is that proportion? What is that characteristics? Let us suppose, so mean ±1 standard deviation. See this area. Fine. Within this mean +1 standard deviation, 34.13% of your total observations will fall within that range. And 34.13% observations will fall within mean plus or mean minus 1 standard deviation, this area. Totally speaking, within the area of mean plus or minus 1 standard deviation, 66.26% of your observation will fall within this area. For example, you have 100 observation, or 68 observation values will be within this mean plus or minus 1 standard deviation. Again, this is mean plus or minus 1. 68% observation fall within this mean plus or minus 1 standard deviation. This is very, very important as far as the normal distribution is concerned. And second one, you see, I'm expanding it, mean plus or minus 2 standard deviation. Okay. Percentage of your observations will fall within this area. Fine. Mean plus or minus 2 standard deviation of what proportion of your observation? If you have 100 observation, 95%, that means 95% value will be fall within standard deviation. This is the second property of it. Again, I'm expanding it. Mean plus or minus 3 standard deviation. This is the level. Okay, these are the different values within the range. Fine. You see, 99.72% of the observations will fall within this range of mean plus or minus 3 standard deviation. This is a very important property of normal distribution. That means if you have the mean and standard deviation, plus or minus 1 standard deviation to the mean, 68.26% of observations will fall. Plus or minus 2 standard deviation, 95.4% observations will fall within mean plus or minus 2 standard deviation. And 99.7% of the observations will fall within the range of mean plus or minus 3 standard deviations. This is very important characteristics of normal distribution. So with one, then I repeat, 99.72% of the observations will fall within this range. This is what I told. Fine. See this example, then I will stop it. A study was conducted among 150 patients with the tuberculosis to assess their vitamin D level. Fine. And this figure one, it follows normal distribution. I plotted the graph, it follows normal distribution. This property is applicable only for normal distribution. Okay, let us suppose the vitamin D level among these 150 patients follows normal distribution. Mean vitamin D is 18.5. Okay, and standard deviation is 1.5. I calculated such standard deviation is 1.5. Fine. Please remember that property. What is the 68, 99, and 95 and 99% rule? That's called 68, 95, and 99% rule. It is applicable only for normal distribution. This data follows normal distribution. Okay. What is the mean here? Mean is 18.5. Okay, plus 1 standard deviation means 20, plus 2 standard deviation means 21.5, plus 3 standard deviation means 23, minus 1 standard deviation means 17, mean minus 2 is 15.5, minus 3 standard deviation is 14. Fine. Out of 150, okay, 66%, remember this one, 68.26% of cases will fall within the range of mean plus or minus 1 standard deviation. That means out of 150, how many? 68.26% of 150. That is 102 patients data will fall within the range of 17 to 20. Fine. That means out of 150, 102 subjects value will be within the range of 17 to 20. Fine. This is a very important aspect as far as the normal distribution is concerned. See, let us suppose we are increasing it plus or minus 2. That means 15.5 to 21.5. This is the range. 15 point, this is a plus or minus 2. Say, what proportion? 95.44% of 150. Okay, that is 144 observations will fall. 144 patients value will be fall within the range of 15.5 to 21.5. Again, I am increasing, that is mean plus or minus 2 standard deviation. So mean plus or minus 3 standard deviation, how much it will fall? We know that 99.72% observations will fall within the range of mean plus or minus 3 standard deviation. Therefore, how much? 148 subjects value will be falling within the range of this, what is called 14 to 23. So this is a very important characteristics of normal distribution. 96, 68, 95 and 99% rules of which is applicable only to the normal distribution. Fine. So whenever you have just seen the normal distribution, see this normal distribution with a small standard deviation. Therefore, the width is less. So it's a larger standard deviation. So the width is more. Width is decided by the what's called standard deviation. And variety of pairs, you see the different types of normal distribution. Okay. So normal distributions are always symmetric. Okay, it's a symmetric. That means in normal distribution, mean, median, and mode are equal. Why it is equal? Because it is symmetric. Left side and right sides are same. So extreme lower and extreme higher values are equal. That means both the tails are equal. Extreme lower values and extreme higher values are equal, and most of the observations are clustered in the middle of it. So most of the values are clustered around the mean. That is why we call it as a normal distribution. So don't expect in biological, in the specialty world where we are dealing with, data will fall always normal distribution. That means it may be non-normal as well. What way it is non-normal? Extreme lower and extreme higher values are not equally distributed. That means tails are not equal. But in normal distribution, see the extreme lower, but always it is not so biological sciences, biological variables, because its behavior is very most of the time. Okay, so the extreme lower values and extreme values are not equally being distributed. Sometimes left tail will be more than that of right tail, and right tail will be more than that of left tail. That means most of the observations are clustered either in the left side or the right tail. So that is called as, they are called as a skewed distribution. Okay, if it is not normal, then they are called as a skewed distribution. Fine. So they are called a non-normal distribution. That is called as a skewed distribution. So like this, it will get. Okay, skew refers the tail of the distribution. Skewed distribution means one tail is more. Symmetric means both the tails are same. Both the tails are equal. But skewed distribution means one tail is more than that of other one. Therefore, it is called as a skewed, which is skewed towards right or skewed towards right. It's a tail is more in the right side and tail is more in the left side. That means skew refers the tail of the distribution. If the skew is same in for the left and right, it is normal. The skew is not same, the tail is not same, not equal in both sides, then they are called as a skewed distribution. It's a positively skewed or negatively skewed. Positively skewed means the tail is more in the right side. Negatively skewed means tail is more in the left side. Okay, so tail is more in right side, it's a right positively skewed or right skewed. Tail is more in the left tail, that's a negatively skewed or left skewed. If the tail is same, then it is called as a normal distribution. See, like this it will come. See this distribution. When I'm just seeing the shape of the graph, it is the left tail is more, right? The tail is more on the left side. Therefore, this is a negatively skewed or left skewed distribution. It is not a normal because the tail is not same. The right tail is less, left tail is more. That means the extreme lower values are what's called very small. Okay, so it's a skewed distribution, negatively skewed distribution, very few lower values. So in this case, mean and median and mode are not same. In this case, this will be the mean, this will be the median, and this will be the mode. Mean will always less than median, which is less than mode. Whereas in normal distribution, mean and median and mode are same. Negatively skewed distribution, that means left tail is more than that of right tail. Extreme lower values are small, extreme lower values are low. Therefore, that left tail is more. Therefore, mean is less than median, which is less than mode. That is the characteristics of negatively skewed distribution and non-normal distribution. So other way, let us suppose the distribution can happen like this also. Most of the scores are low and very few are higher. Extreme high values are small. Therefore, tail is more on the right side, right? The graph will be like this. Fine. So what will be the position? Mean will be here, median will be here, and mode will be here. That means mean will be higher than the median, which is higher than mode. Okay, mean will be always higher than median, than mode. This is called as a positively skewed distribution. Therefore, the data may be either normal or it may be skewed distribution. In normal distribution, both the tails will be same, and most of the observations are tested towards the center, that will towards the mean. Whereas sometimes what will happen, the data will not be normally distributed. It will be skewed either to left side, therefore left tail will be more than that of the right tail. Then it is called the left tail distribution or negatively skewed distribution. In negatively skewed distribution, mean will be less than median, less than mode. So sometimes what will have the higher values, extreme higher values are less. Therefore, the right tail will be more than that of the right tail. Therefore, it's a right skewed or positively skewed. Therefore, in positively skewed distribution, mean is greater than median and greater than mode. This will be the behavior of the data. First, you have to assess whether it is normal skewed. If it is normal, we have one method, and if it is skewed, we have another method of what's called analysis. Towards the end, as you know, research methodology and research methods largely depends upon statistical methods. Okay, so always better to have a consultation with your trained biostatistician. So a trained statistician can help you in all aspects of your research in the prior itself. Okay, so there is a famous quoting by the R.F. Fisher. He is called as the father of modern statistics, the father of all the tests of statistical significance. So he made a quote like this: to consult a statistician after an experiment is finished is often merely to ask him to conduct a postmortem examination. What for? He can perhaps say that what the experiment died off. Okay, so always better to have a discussion. We can have a consultation with the biostatistician in the beginning itself. So he'll be able to, they will be able to help you in designing your study, in what is called in terms of your formulating your objective, formulating your hypothesis, formulating your research question. Okay, what is your idea? Because you will be using the right terminology. They'll be able to help you to identify the proper design. They'll be able to help you to identify the proper sampling. They'll be able to help you to identify the proper estimate of the sample size. They'll be able to identify differentiate different types of variables. So what are the independent, dependent, and confounding variables? And they'll be able to identify. They'll be able to help you to identify what are the most statistical methods. What are the statistical methods required for this study to have a more reliable and what is called valid research. With this, I'm stopping here. Thank you very much. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for your wonderful and very explanatory lecture on introduction of biostatistics and variables data collections. And it is very useful for us. And it is the first time we are asking about this topic. And we are very glad to have you as a resource person. Thank you, sir. Any questions? Any questions from the participants?
There are questions in the chat box.
Chat box. Please post your questions in chat box. How will we control the comforting variables from Athira? How will we control the comforting variables from Athira PGOP? Sir?
So the question is that how we can control the confounding variable. That's what the question is that.
Yeah.
Fine. So there are different ways for controlling the confounding variable at different levels. In the beginning itself, I would say that in the initial level, that is what the design stage itself. For example, you have to use the proper design. Okay. So based on the first one is the design stage. Second one is based on your inclusion and exclusion criteria. Okay, what are the potential confounders? Okay, if you are not able to accommodate those confounders, you can use strengthen your inclusion and exclusion criteria. The third one is by using the matching. So for example, case control design. So analytical design you are using by using the proper matching can be done. Either say individual matching or grouped matching. If it's an RCT, yes, definitely we'll be going with what's called a randomization. Randomization allocation concealment will be taken care of the what is called confounding to a certain extent. That is the design stage. And later on, if you are not able to control all these things at any of the stages, the designing stage, identification of population is concerned, sample size is what is called the randomization is concerned, or the matching is concerned, and during the analysis time, okay. So we will be identifying what are the effect of different confounders. That means it can be controlled at different time points. You have to take different steps, because initial stage it's of the design staging. It's a large level of, it's a large amount of effort you have to take it at the design stage itself. But if we are not able to control at the design stage, as I told you, inclusion and exclusion criteria, yes, it's one of the very important aspects. Find the matching. Population, identification of population. That is another one. Identification of population itself. What population we are going to have. Then you have the randomization. Only the randomization, not only the concealment. Allocation concealment is another important issue. And any of these steps we are not able to make it out, then during analysis time, we will see if a variable is playing a confounding role or not. Then accordingly, during analysis time, we will be identifying the effect of this variable on the outcome as a confounder. We will assess it and we will report it. These are different steps used in different stages to identify and to control the confounding effect.